So let's look at some ways that you can fix up and smooth skin and hair in Photoshop for portraitures. I'd like to have my history panel open, and I also like to have my layers panel open so I can step back and forth. The first tool is the spot healing tool, and you can just go right through and click on blemishes. I like to Control plus to zoom in and just get main blemishes. I don't like to take away freckles or moles unless someone asks me to. But you can see it starts to do some funky things sometimes. So if it does that, you can always go into the other healing tool, which if you hold Alt and click, it takes a sample of a clear area and it'll blend it with the area you paint the sample on. So hold Alt and click. It's just like the clone stamp, except it blends it with the area that you paint. With the clone stamp, which is right here, remember the clone stamp, you sample an area and it takes exactly what has been sampled and it replaces it in the other area. So that's a good way as well. So I'm going to just ignore little tiny spots, but I go through with the healing brushes. The patch tool is nice. You can click and circle a blemish and drag to another area. Click and circle and drag to another area. It blends it with the area that you drag to. So it kind of slowly and subtly closes or blends those areas. So I just go through and get the main little points and heal things up. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom in and out. Now, if you notice, her hair is quite frayed and her face is a little bit, her eyes are a little bit dark. So we're going to talk about some ways to brighten those up in a minute too. Right now, I went back to my healing tool and it's not working because it's still selected from when I was on the patch tool. So anytime you see this little sparkling selection, nothing else will work unless you turn that off. So I can click somewhere else and it will turn off, or I can go up to select and deselect, or Control D will deselect. So if something is selected, even the tiniest little area, you might not even notice, but if none of your tools are working, try Control D because a little area might be selected. Okay, so with flyaways, I'm going to go in with a spot healing brush and kind of just go and slowly get rid of these major ones at least. And then one of my tricks that I like to do is use the clone stamp to clone over some of the fuzzier areas. So I just clean up the bigger strands. And I'm zoomed in enough so I can see. I undo if it does weird things, like it just did something weird with the background there that I don't want to keep. Okay, so I think that's okay. Right here I have like a branch sticking out in front of her, but I want to keep that. I'm going to go to the clone stamp. I'm going to make it a little bit larger, and I'm going to paint over this with a clone stamp, but I want to use a soft brush so it's subtle, and I want to use a transparent brush. Turn the opacity down so it just does a little at a time. So watch this. I'm going to hold Alt and click, and I need to pay attention to the background because there's some weird spots or some reflective spots that I don't want to repeat, but I'm sampling there, and I'm just kind of lightly, see how it lightly is following my brush. Remember, the key is with the clone stamp, you want to sample often. Otherwise, you start getting these weird, like repeating areas. So I'm sampling. It's only on a semi-transparent brush, so it's not doing a ton at a time. I'm going to hold Alt click, bring this over. I'm just kind of filling in her hair in these areas, but I need to watch the background and make sure I'm not messing up the background and what's going on. Zoom out too, because like you might not need to do as much as you think you do, because some of this isn't even going to be visible when you're zoomed out. No one's going to look at your picture that closely. So you can just kind of, just a light, fuzzy, transparent brush to get in and kind of fix some of these areas. I just don't want to ruin what's in the background. So I could even sample from here to try to get a similar tone. I'm watching the X from my original sample area all the time to make sure it's going into the right color, and I'm sampling the right color. But see, that just kind of cleaned it up.